Hey there, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am part of Power to Fly's hosting team, and I could not be more excited to get to host today's upcoming session. Now, before I go and introduce our speaker, I just want to go over some real quick housekeeping items, especially important if, maybe this is your first Power to Fly event, in which case, hi, it's nice to meet you. We're so happy to have you join us. If you are one of our frequent flyers and you are with us all the time, this will all be kind of old hat to you. But if you are joining us after a hiatus, maybe it's been a little bit, welcome back. We're so happy to see you again. So like all of our virtual events, today's event is all about you. It's about our community members and making sure that you all get valuable information and that the time that you spend with us today is well worth it. So to that end, you are highly encouraged to participate as much as you would like. You can turn your cameras on if you would like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely, but no pressure to be Instagram perfect, y'all. I've got about 8 pounds of dry shampoo in my hair. We truly do not care if you are coming to us from a corner office, your living room couch, a closet, your car, does not matter. We want to meet you where you are. So please don't stand on ceremony or feel like you have to, kind of meet some standard to join us. Now, if you do want to keep your camera off, completely understood, no problems there. Just know that if you have any kind of privacy concerns at all, as long as you don't come off mute today, you will not show up on the live stream or the recording. So if you've got privacy issues, but you do still want to, show us your face, just don't come off mute, you'll be good to go. Now, if you still want to participate, but you don't want to come on camera or you don't want to, to do any of that, not a problem. You can still participate by asking questions or sending in comments in that group chat in Zoom. Now, if you have a question that you would like to ask and you want to be kept anonymous for whatever reason, doesn't matter, I am happy to do that. All you have to do is DM your question to me. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, on the drop-down menu in your Zoom chats. Instead of sending it to everyone, you'll just DM me. Now, I did say today's session is being live streamed and recorded. And what that means for you is you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back, you get to enjoy the conversations we're about to have, and you don't have to worry if you missed a reference that somebody made or a resource that they shared or a link or anything like that. What's going to happen is everybody that registered for this event is going to get an email from Power to Fly in about 1 to 2 days. And it's going to have a link to where you can rewatch this recording on our website. Now, let's say that Natalia shares something today that is just so unbelievably mind-blowing. You cannot wait to share it with a coworker or friend or relative. You don't have to wait 1 to 2 business days. So we're also live streaming to our YouTube channel, and this recording will be posted there usually within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the live stream. So you can always head over there, share the links from there as much as you would like to. There's also a big selection of our previous sessions are hosted there. So you can, take advantage of even more free resources on our YouTube channel. I'll be sharing the links for all of that in the chat thread here in just a little bit. But you can also head over to our Power to Fly website, powertofly.com, because you will be able to watch the recording there, and our entire library of all of our recorded chats, everything that has happened since the beginning of the Chat and Learn is there on our website, and all free and searchable to everyone. So we would absolutely love to be a resource for you and want to make sure that you understand how to utilize us to the best of your abilities. Now, the last thing I want to highlight is that we are, like I said, on social media. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And I'll send links to a bunch of these later, but I just want to flag for y'all, if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, that means you don't have to worry about missing out on chats like this, because you will get an alert when our next video gets posted. If you want to make sure that you're able to access job recs and the Meet the Recruiter videos, we share all kinds of great stuff like that on our various social media platforms. So I very much recommend that you check us out there. The other thing that we're going to encourage you to do is, you are part of Power to Fly's community. And one of the hallmarks of our community members is that we want to make things better for everyone, right? We want an egalitarian workforce. We want to see a better world than we have now. So one of the ways we want to make that happen is by sharing these resources as widely as we can. So if you would like to, please feel free, take photos or video as we go, share it out to your social media network, and let people know that you are growing with Power to Fly. Anything we can do to get these free resources in the hands of as many people as possible is something we are dedicated to. So please feel free to share. We would love to retweet, repost, reshare anything that you do. You can tag us, we are at Power to Fly, or you can use our hashtag, which is just hashtag Power to Fly. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to today's speaker. I have been looking forward to this all weekend, so I'm really excited to get started. Natalia Alvarez is joining us today, and she is a leadership communication coach specializing in working in uncertain, complex, and task-oriented environments. Now, Natalia has more than 15 years of academic and consultancy experience in international organizations, such as the United Nations, the European Commission, and top European universities, including the University of East Anglia and the University of Aberdeen. She is a former human rights lawyer, holds a PhD in law, and is an accredited mediator qualified by the International Mediation Institute. Natalia coaches leaders to develop an effective and empathetic communication approach that helps them to manage conflict, create collaboration, and perform at the highest level. Natalia, I am so excited for you to join our stage today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we dive into questions? Oh, you're on mute. No worries, it happens to me at least once a week.
Yeah, no, excited just to be here and to hear the question and to have a conversation with all of you. So nothing to add.
Yay. All right. Last but not least, before we dive into questions, I just want to highlight for y'all some of the main takeaways you can expect to get from today's session. Now, we identified this by looking at the questions that you all submitted, but what that means is, these are some of the things we're going to try and get to, but you all took time out of your day to be here with us for the recording or for the taping. So we want to make sure that we reward you for that. If you would like, you are more than welcome and encouraged to drive today's conversation. All right. I want to make sure that you get value out of this, that you get the answers you came for, but I can't make sure that happens if I don't know the questions y'all want me to ask. So we are going to try and get through a ton of the questions that you all submitted. But if you have a question during today's event, send it in the chat. If you want us to dive in deeper on a term or an acronym or an idea, let me know in the chat. You can always DM me if you'd like to stay anonymous, but I can't ask questions if I don't know what y'all want to know. So if we are going over one of your questions and we need more context or you want to share more details, go ahead and share that. If you submitted a question and you're not sure if we're going to get to it, ask it in the chat. That is the best way to make sure that we are able to answer your questions today. Ask early, ask often, and I'll keep prompting all of you to do that as well. All right, so I'm going to stop with my screen share and we are going to dive on into our questions. So Natalia, the first question that we got really was sent into us in a number of different ways. We kind of ran around the same a lot of the same issues. So one of the things I want to touch on is ways that we can manage conversations at work that move us on a personal level. This person had said, it happened to me that while having a difficult conversation with my boss, I felt the need to cry, and I obviously don't want that to happen. So how can we manage these conversations more effectively at work? I don't know about you, but I do this too. Ever since I turned probably 28, 29, if I'm upset, I cry, even if I'm not like upset enough to cry. And, it's very frustrating for me. I really hate it, but I can't be the only one going through this. So what would you say to this person who is trying to manage, emotions like that or displays of emotion in a professional setting?
Yes. Well, the first thing is that it's okay to show emotions. And I would like to know why this person feels that it's not safe to show emotions. And crying is just as emotion as any other. There are a lot of things behind crying as an emotion. It can be joy, it can be anger, it can be frustration. So the first thing is what it is about this emotion and how do I feel about showing this specific emotion or other emotions. But if I don't feel safe, I will say that you can always ask for a break. You can say, listen, I feel that it's too much for me right now. Would you give me 5 minutes? And leave the room. And if you don't feel safe for whatever reason, that's okay. You can always remove yourself, ask for a break, and in order to gather yourself to keep on having that conversation. There is nothing wrong. For some people, it's okay to cry at work, and they can feel comfortable. I didn't find a lot of people that find comfortable, crying, but asking for a break is some. I think that we can give we can give ourselves that gift of saying, I need to feel safe to have this conversation. And this is number one. To have a difficult conversation, we need to feel safe. And the other person needs to face 9 o'clock nearly here. So needs to feel safe too. That's it.
No, I think you make a really good point, right? That these emotions are not problems in and of themselves, right? Crying is not bad in and of itself. And it's okay to feel like you don't want to express this kind of stuff at work. Even if you're safe to, it's totally fine if you're just one of those people that does not like to do emotions in a public place. It's okay. But I love that you're highlighting, Natalia, that, these things aren't bad on their own. And maybe the reason you don't want to do these things might be because you don't feel like you're in a safe environment. I don't know about y'all, if anybody else has experienced this, throw your experience in the chat. But for me, it feels like I'm undercutting my position, right? Like people aren't going to take me seriously because I can't control my emotions or something. Have you struggled with this at any point in your career, or have you been lucky enough to not be in a situation where you might cry at work?
I used to teach human rights, and what I found is, especially when I got pregnant and I was teaching, I had to avoid certain videos because I would just start crying and I could not stop. And I found it difficult. That situation when I was in front of 100 students. So what I did is I said, okay, I'm not going to be very useful as a lecturer if I'm crying or becoming very emotional. So I tried to tone a little bit what I could tolerate and without getting very upset.
And you make a really good point there, right? Like if the proximity to, to these, we'll call them triggers, is what's going on, and it's part of your job, you can't really get away from it. That sounds like a good compromise to make, of saying like, okay, I'm going to stick to what the students need to be taught and everything, but I'm not going to drive myself nuts over this. I'm not going to try and uphold to a certain level if that's just not what I'm capable of doing. And I want to go back to something you said at first about saying like, it's okay to take a break, right? Like it's all right to say, can we stop this conversation and take it? Have you done it as like, give me a 5-minute break before? Do you find that it's more effective to say like, can we pause this and pick it up later? What have you done if you've been in this position?
I think also depends on the cultural context and what is suitable. For different contexts, different environments at work, what it feels right for you. But I would say whatever it feels right for you in the moment. Normally in that moment, you can't really think that much. Your amygdala is kicking off, is telling you to freeze, to fight, to fly. So you can't really start thinking, what is the adequate exact word? It's just like safe. I want to be safe. So whatever is happening, whatever you're saying, it's going to be fine. But just to have that split of a moment of saying, maybe sometimes it's breathe. Just breathe and say, okay, I need to pause.
Yeah.
That's okay. Whatever you're going to say is okay. It doesn't need to be the perfect formula, but look after yourself in that moment is the most important thing.
I like that. I very much like that advice. Eleanor had chimed in the chat saying, I think it comes off as unprofessional or attempting to manipulate. And I think that's a really, thank you, Eleanor, for sharing that, because I feel like that's something a lot of people worry about. It's also something that it's a very patriarchal assessment of something that may or may not affect the opposite gender. So I think that, it is something that we're all fighting against, right? You can't show emotion, or you can't show anger, or you're a bitch. You can't show that you're upset or you're manipulative. And so I think that, that's a really important thing to touch on, is that this type of bias and this type of thinking is absolutely why people don't feel that psychological safety at work. Heather had actually chimed in the chat asking, how can we create psychologically safe environments? Do you have any tips for somebody who is, trying to make this, make their workplace more psychologically safe?
Elements of psychology, for me, when I work with psychological safety, I always say that there are some elements that can help us to create that psychological safety for us and for others. The first one is the right time to have this conversation. So sometimes the person is really very upset, you're very upset, it's the right time to have this conversation. Is the right environment to have this conversation? Is it really hot? We are like all very hungry and sugar levels are so low that this is just not the right, moment for us to have this conversation. Am I ready to validate and acknowledge the other person's point of view? Mm-hmm. Or I'm so angry myself that I cannot really listen to that person. So I'm in a sort of a state of mind that I can show some empathy. Not agreeing, but listening. Such as, I thought that you came with a very aggressive comment, for example, in that meeting. I'm going to get nuts when I hear that, or I'm saying, okay. So I'm curious enough to ask, okay, what does it mean exactly when? How does it work? I would like to learn more. Mm-hmm. And the fourth one, is the group pressure. How is it that the person I'm going to talk to feels in the sense of belonging to the group? So maybe that person has been signalized as a troublemaker. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk to Tom, who, by the way, is, the person who is not just and aligned with this team. So yeah, Tom obviously is not going to feel very safe. Although I'm just calm, it's the right moment, it's the right time, but Tom doesn't feel that he belongs to the group because everybody is just saying that it's his fault. Mm-hmm. So these four elements are good point starters in order to create a safety environment for me and for others in order to have certain conversations.
Okay, yeah. All right, so, let's kind of go to the other end of the spectrum. A lot of people wanted to know about how they could help manage their anger, especially when they're having a difficult conversation with a teammate and they know that they are actually in the right. What is the best way to make them comprehend our point of view? Okay, so we're trying to tackle two different things, right? We're trying to tackle, maintaining our own emotions like anger and reining those in, as well as trying to talk to someone and convince them to see our perspective. So what would you start with when it comes to this? Should we focus on the communication aspect, or should we focus on the emotional aspect internally first?
Okay, they're not separated. We are irrational, we are emotional. So I will say, don't have a conversation when you're mad. That's the first thing, because it's not going to go right. Your amygdala is going to take over, and your facial expressions are going to show that you're mad and angry, and the other person is going to pick up on that, and his or her amygdala is going to kick off. So then you have a battlefield in less than 5 seconds. Our amygdala, there are studies that show at this moment that if just show some faces, that are some facial expressions that are about related to anger or fear, amygdala is going to pick up, even if you're not aware, and you're going to come defensive. And then the whole process starts, adrenaline. Your heart to start like beating very fast, you start sweating, and your muscles tense, and you're ready to jump intellectually, physically, emotionally. So if you're angry, don't have the conversation. Remove yourself from the conversation and start analyzing a little bit what is going on. And sometimes it helps to work with somebody else and to be a little bit factual. So this person did that, and I did too. And, and try to see what is going on. What are the narratives? What is happening? What are the interests? And when you just can see a little bit the other person, then have the conversation. maybe I want to link to three things that it's related to part of this question. I mean, like when I'm right and I want the other person to see, I mean, that they are wrong, right? So one of the things that we mentioned is what make a conversation, a difficult conversation, turn into a battlefield. And I said that there are three things. Well, there are possibly a couple of things more, but most important one is that I am right and you're wrong. If you want any difficult conversation to turn into a battlefield, go like this, yeah, with very sweet voice, very calm, but just basically saying, I am right, you're so wrong, you know.
And aren't I so great for telling you how wrong you are?
Exactly. Be grateful. I mean, it's feedback. It's constructive. I just want you the best for you. You're so wrong. And then we're surprised that the other persons really get mad about this. And what is happening is that being wrong is unsafe from an evolutionary point of view. So when you're trying to make somebody to believe that, and there are a lot of studies also about loss aversion, people are going to react not really very well. They're going to feel in danger. So, and they're going to escalate faster. I mean, if you go in that mood. A second one is things such as, I just want you to understand.
Yeah.
So nearly, which is a variation of you're wrong and I'm right, you know, I just want you to see, you know, like if you're not seeing, like if you're not understanding, like if you're not rational. And again, the other person is still feeling like, you know, like all the alarms, all the amygdala. There is something wrong with me because I don't understand. There is something wrong with me because I don't see. And the third one that is, especially women, we suffer. I mean, this one quite a lot. You're too emotional. You're becoming too emotional like this. You can't, it's like nearly like you can't think right now. I mean, I can, which is related to having some sort of power or control over the other person. You're trying to win. And that's the end of it. I mean, when you go to a conversation, a difficult conversation, because you want to win, you want to convince, you think you're right, get out, shut up, don't go. If you're not ready to learn in a difficult conversation, don't have that conversation.
Yeah.
Full stop. If you just want to have something out of this conversation, that will be. Don't get into a difficult conversation to convince, to win, to be right. Have a difficult conversation to learn about yourself, about the other person. And
that's powerful.
If you can't have that, don't go, don't do it. Wait.
I just want to sit here with that for a second. I absolutely love that. Trisha had responded in the chat saying reframing workplace conversations in terms of responsibility versus right and wrong, which I think is a really, really good shift of focus. They also said be prepared for several different outcomes, that because you control yourself, you might not get what you want as a resolution, but pay attention to what you're being told so that you can plan your own life with the right information. So I think that is really great. Chris also loves that idea of having these conversations to learn, not to be right or to, you know, to win. And Mary, thank you for sharing here. Mary says, I wasn't ever allowed to be angry about my situation of being promoted, even though it got me more work that should have gone to like 6 other employees. And then having my boss cut my pay because I got COVID. I was younger than everyone. I didn't have much professional experience. I ended up doing a lot of deep breathing and counting and self-talk. Most of the time it worked. I just knew that I wouldn't be in that same position forever. So I focused on the positive things like mentoring and helping other communities. Do you think, you know, at least in your experience, do a lot of people do this? Do they try and just kind of turn it inward and do the work on themselves without asking or without pushing back on, you know, the behavior or the situation that they're in? No judgment either way. I think that sounded a little judgy how I worded it. So sorry, Mary, no judgment, because I've done this a lot as well. But do you think that that's common, that people would rather work on themselves than try and change something around them?
Yeah, that's such a good question, isn't it? It's the power of anger. It's another emotion that is so powerful. And we can get the world on fire, and it's good. It could be good too. Now, how we manage anger, and I don't have myself a question. I was just remembering I had a couple of months to have a very difficult conversation with somebody. It took me 2 days without sleeping to be able, because I was so mad. I couldn't have that. So, but anger helps us to set up limits, help us to look after ourselves too, and to say, well, that's not right. Now, I'm not advocating to become people who are not stepping into injustice and situations which are unfair and say, no, I'm just going to be nice all the time and say, no, I mean, that's not what it is about when I was saying that you need to get into a conversation in which you're able to learn. You can learn about yourself too. You can learn about set up a limit without being angry, but still firm and assertive, without insulting, respecting the other person, for example. Saying, listen, that happened, I felt like this, and from now on, I don't want you to call me at 10 o'clock at night, because I will not respond. That's not, I don't know, in my... So open up. If you want, for example, at the end, you can say, well, I mean, if you have some issues that are urgent, I will happy to listen until 5 o'clock, but from 5 to 10, I'm not available. Maybe we need to think about our schedule to see how we can manage this, but that's what it is. So you set up a limit, set up clearly, without the need of denigrating, making the other person feel bad, making the other person feel guilty. You know, we can look after ourselves in a way that is assertive. And so anger sometimes is a wake-up call to, I'm violating my limits. I'm not being fair to myself. There is something here where it's wrong. And we need to listen to that. Anger is not, sometimes it's a wake-up call. Say, hello, I mean, what are you doing working at 10 o'clock every single day? What are you doing if you didn't get that promotion, and then on the top of it, you're doing the same work without the salary? Hello. We need to have a conversation here.
Well, it probably, I'm sure that, you know, in no small way, it goes back to a lot of the ways that people are socialized, right? At least from my experience, which is a very American centric point of view, I was not raised to express anger. Anger wasn't okay. You were supposed to be nice. You were supposed to be calm with people. You were supposed to work together and compromise, but it wasn't okay to be angry at people. And so that was, you know, something that's been super hard in my life to try and kind of unlearn, is that anger is not a bad emotion. It's fine. And like you said, you know, a lot of time anger is your brain reacting to the fact that your boundaries are not being respected. And it might be by you, it might be by other people, but you know, Natalia is absolutely right. You have to try and learn how to listen to that voice so you can figure out what it's saying, especially when it's screaming at you. You know, rather than trying to learn how to translate the message at, you know, 1,000,000 decibels, try, you know, kind of continuous checking in to try and figure out, like, am I angry right now? And if so, about what? Like, what do you think is the source?
And also,
sorry.
It's less tolerated in women and certain minorities too. And we need to be very aware of that. So anger is expression of power, and power is reserved for certain people in our societies. So there are a lot of things. I don't want to get very much into that, but anger is not necessarily bad. And it's a good question to say, I mean, reflect a little bit and be curious about my anger and all the people anger and what happened when that emotion is displayed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep working through questions. If you've got them, send them in the chat. I'm going to try and get to as many as we can. This next person had written in asking, what should we do when a coworker is putting the blame on our shoulders for something that's not really related to us? How can we point the team in the right direction without giving someone else the responsibility for what went wrong? I thought this is a really interesting question, right? You want to clarify that this isn't your fault, but you're not trying to blame it on someone else or pass the buck. You are just trying to clarify. So if we're getting into this conversation, you know, we talked about trying to learn something. How should we get into this conversation, and what should we be looking to learn?
I love this question. I think when we work with emotions, we need to see what is underneath that emotion. So many times when somebody wants to blame other people and want to put guilt on other people, there is a lot of fear underneath. So it's interesting to see if that is that person fear, or is a sort of a working environment fear where nobody can make a mistake. So people are endorsing mistakes. So it's not me, it's you, you know. So is this kind of social thing? Is a culture that we are all the time blaming each other, that blame and guilt circulate in here, or is just this person that cannot tolerate for whatever reason? And what do we do as a group? So emotions circulate and doesn't belong to one person specifically. So it's interesting just to be curious about how do we do with blaming and guilt here? How much do we tolerate mistakes, and what do we do when somebody makes a mistake? That will be the first thing that I will try to understand when a coworker is trying to blame somebody else about something. So I will personally try to remove that allocation of guilt, and rather looking at things objectively, a kind of factual. So, okay, so what are we talking about? This happened, and this was done, and this one, and this one, and these are the consequences. Okay, so what can we learn? So when we put the emphasis into the learning rather than who is the one who did wrong and what are we going to do with this person, you know, everybody's like, oh, it was not me, it was her. No, it was him, you know, as people start gossiping, right? Yeah. But when you start saying, okay, what are we going to learn about this? How we can make it different? People are like getting more like, okay, so I'm safe here. Now I can talk. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is divert the whole thing into very much that's not important right now, and help people to feel safe again and have the conversation that needs to happen, which is, what are we going to learn? Because yes, it was Tom again. and what, you know? Yeah, we can crucify Tom, but we didn't learn as a team. We're going to make the same mistake. So it doesn't matter whether it was Tom or Peter, you know? Yeah, and what? How is this helping this team to go to the next step? Making us feel safe because somebody else is doing it, but next time it's going to be me, so I'm still in fear. So that would be when I
like that. I'm sorry, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I think it's wonderful advice, right? Because you know, you don't, if what you're going in is trying to figure out whose fault it is, then all you're going to learn is whose fault this was, or where the breakdown happened. But if you're looking at it instead as, we need to know what happened so we can fix it and then not do it again. Mm-hmm. You know, it also goes back to what you're talking about earlier, about that psychological safety. You know, if the team doesn't have that, then of course they're just going to be looking for who was responsible, because if that's the only question being asked, then that's the only answer that matters, or at least, you know, to people who are asking questions. So I think that's I love that. I love that idea of, instead of trying to figure out whose fault it is, figure out what happened and how not to do it again, you know, does create that sense of, it's okay to say you were involved in something. It's okay, even if you weren't involved, to be like, hey, I'm still interested because I want to know what's going on. I think that is wonderful. Okay. Now, we talked about earlier about, you know, if you feel like you are riled up about something, whether you are, you know, whenever you're experiencing those very, very strong emotions and you want to kind of take a step back, what should we do if we're already in the middle of the battlefield? Is there a way to kind of walk yourself back if you realize belatedly, oh, this was not where I wanted this to go?
Mm-hmm. I would say the same. There is another way. If both person, I mean, I'm putting it in two normally, are very high up, and you need to go and you realize, like, oh my God, I mean, we are already in this battlefield. You can say, I mean, oh my God, I realize that we're going nowhere, and I care about you, and I care about this conversation. Can we just stop it? So go it in a way rather than, oh, I mean, it's like, you know, really very sharp and oh, this is going nowhere. I mean, this is so stupid and blah, blah, blah. So we need to stop. And then maybe we can give ourselves 5 minutes. that it sounds really very dismissive and a little bit. But if we can find like a sweet spot inside us a little bit, like breathing, sometimes it's like, okay, all right, so I'm safe, I'm okay. And then from that place of softness, make like an offer to the other person and say, wow, I'm feeling so agitated and maybe I'm not expressing myself in the way I would love to. So would you mind if we just stop for 2 minutes, 3, and we fix a cup of tea and we come back? So that can change totally the conversation when you restart again.
I like that. I love the suggestion of saying, like, being able to see what's going on in the conversation and open up, not necessarily like open up that vulnerability, but just say to the other person, this is not how I wanted this to go. You know, even sometimes just even if you're not sure how to express that, just stating sometimes like, this is not the way I wanted this to happen. Can we take a break? That's okay. It's all right to say you don't want to have this conversation, right? Does it matter? Does that answer change if you are the person that started that started the conversation? Do you think that, as the person that began the conversation, do you still have the right to say, like, let's put a pin in this? Or can you only say that if you are the recipient of this conversation?
I think it doesn't matter. What I think is important is not let it go very high. It's like if a car that goes like, to brake and you are like 40 miles per hour or 500 miles per hour, which you can go with a car anyway, but it's more difficult to brake the faster you go. So when you escalate to a certain point, it's a little bit more difficult to go down to level 3 or 4. So it takes a little bit of awareness. And what you learn to develop with practice is like, if you have like somebody who is talking and somebody who is helping you to be safe inside, and then like, I'm saying this, ooh, no, I'm going to hold. So there is like an attention. So basically what is happening is with practice, what you will see is that you're not driven by your amygdala. When the amygdala kick off, it's very difficult. I mean, just to get back to a place, breathing is excellent for that because it brings you in, like, calm down, the heart, everything. Drink a little bit of water, But if once you get into the amygdala, what we are going is into a state in which is more difficult for us to control ourselves, because it's like you want to be rational, but then, I mean, your all alarms is like, I'm not safe here, I'm not safe, And sometimes it's not a lion in front of you, it's just somebody who's saying you that you're wrong, that is your fault, that you did something terrible. And that feeling, as humans, we can't take it. And if you think about it, we survived by being in the group. When they are telling you this, what they are threatening is your sense of belonging to the group. You can trust your own decisions. You can trust your own emotions. You're not good for the group. And that is not safe in any way. So it's difficult to have a conversation when you're feeling this way. And the only thing you're going to do is fight the person to death. I mean, like, no way, you're not right. You're going to fly and say, I don't want to talk to you. You're so rude. I mean, this is out of question. I'm leaving. Or freeze. You just go down. You don't open your mouth. And you stay until it finishes, say thank you. And you leave. Normally, we have a mode that we go by default.
Yeah.
We tend to fight. The kind of people that you say like, oh, I don't know. Did you cut your hair? Oh, you're now again with this. That they get mad at everything that you say. So,
yes. Everything is perceived to be like an insult or a barb. Yeah.
So you tell something. So by default, we have a mode. So our amygdala tend to go in one mode. And the problem is that sometimes it's not the right way. It's not fighting. Sometimes you need to shut up. And sometimes you need to fight and you need to say something. But when the amygdala take over, you're unable, or not unable, but it's more difficult to choose the right response.
Yeah.
And what we want to take control again of that. So that's why we need to calm down our amygdala and the amygdala of the other person we have in front of us.
Yeah,
because
that's
I can be calm, saying, oh, yes, I mean, I'm going to be very kind and loving, but what you did was so bad for the team. I still don't get it, how you were able to submit that report. And then the other person is like, glong, 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 and you are like, all sweet, I did nothing. Oh, yes, you did. Maybe your amygdala is very okay, but the amygdala of the other person is on fire. So we are looking for both of us here.
Yeah. Ooh, loving this. We guys, y'all are keeping the chat hopping here. I'm trying to stay in both conversations, and it is crazy. I am loving all the conversations that are being had here. So thank you all. A lot of people, had seen some of the comments people had shared about like not feeling like they could express that anger. Emily said, Mary's comment makes me sad. You're absolutely allowed to be mad. I think we need to be careful about how we talk to ourselves about how we feel. The notion of two things being true at the same time, like you can be mad and decide not to act on it. So I think that is very, very interesting. Let's see, a lot of people talked about, having to work exclusively with men for a large part of their career. They got good at expressing anger, or at least, better at it. But you're right. I mean, it's very personal to each person, like what your response is going to be, right? You've got, what is it, the 4 F's: fight, flee, fawn, and freeze. So, and personally, I'm a fawn. That's what I do every time. I hate it. I am working really hard with my therapist to not do that anymore. But, it's one of those things that your brain is in panic and it reverts to the one thing it knows that will keep it safe. Exactly. So I really love breaking it down into that like, kind of chemical reactions going on in your brain, right? Because you can't control that, meds, sure. But, other than that, like, all you can do is work with yourself and try and be, have the highest emotional intelligence for yourself that you can. All right, let's say that you are in a position of being a manager and you're trying to speak to somebody on your team, and that communication style, at least of your report, seems to be very combative or aggressive. What do you recommend for people who are trying to handle an employee who seems to be, very, very aggressive in their communication style?
The first thing I would say is don't negotiate or discuss on positions. So positions in negotiation is on the things that people want, because these are exclusive. So if I said, there is one ice cream and Meg said, I want it, and I say, no, I want it, we're going to have a fight, right? So when we start negotiating and discussing whether this thing or that one, I mean, we're going to get into an argument very fast. So the way to calm down the amygdala, and we don't know what is going on with that person, what kind of life, environment, and we don't know. I mean, it could be many things. I mean, about his upbringing or her upbringing, it doesn't matter. But what we need, he or she feels unsafe. So how we help this person to feel safer is getting an interest into what interests this person, not what they want, but what they need and what is interest for them on their own narrative. Because if we find out that Meg wants an ice cream because it's really very hot, and me too, but then the alternative is, oh, well, I mean, I don't really like sugar. I mean, I prefer a glass of water. Then there is no conflict. So understanding what are the interests helps to calm down a little bit and get into what really matters here. Because sometimes we fight for the most stupid things without understanding what is the matter really. So when people start coming into that is, can we go a little bit deeper? Can we really understand what is going on, the narrative, the feelings, and get a little bit deeper? And we will see that the person is calming down. The more we get into, okay, tell me a little bit more, and why are you interested in it, and why this is important for you? You will find that open up to different possibilities and different ways to talking. So when the person is agitated, when there are things like you feel like, don't go into positions, never.
I like that. I very much like that. And you're right. It does, if you are able to kind of take that step back and instead of focusing on, the exact things at hand and try and pull back and see like what is actually at stake here. Are we both Bob and Jen want that corner desk that's, by the window? Do they want it because they want a window, or do they want it because they don't want to sit by Fred anymore? Like what's actually going on? Then it doesn't really matter quite so much that there's only one chair by the window. If one person wants to get away from Fred and the other one wants the window, then you're fine. You just got to move two people. So I like that idea of trying to pull back to see like, why are we actually having this conflict? What does each person want? Because that way you take yourself from we both want the ice cream to we both actually kind of want different things, and the ice cream might work for some of them, but this other solution will absolutely work. So let's go with this one instead. I very much love that. Thank you for that breakdown. All right, let's talk about the link between between handling difficult conversations and then that need for psychological safety. A lot of people they wrote in asking if there were ways to explain the importance of that psychological safety to, either superiors or people that need to have buy-in, leaders who might not be convinced of the link between the two. Mm-hmm. So if we are facing a situation where we're trying to kind of impress or get someone to understand why we want to create this psychological safety, how do you recommend we explain that to them?
Okay. I would say first is to who? I mean, the audience. Are these senior people that will be impressed by, I don't know, I mean, Harvard Review type of article, or are more people who need to experience that and really will be more maybe influenced by learning in a learning environment, like a type of a workshop, or where people discuss about difficult conversations and what happened to them and when the result was good for them. So it depends on who you're talking to and what is important. How do they want to hear that message? That will be the first question for me to ask, because it's not the message, it's how and when and who is going to be telling that message. Mm-hmm. I have an anecdote from my son, who is nearly a teenager, and we were telling him at home that why he didn't cut his hair, and he said, "No, I don't want to." And next day he came and said, "Oh, I want to go to the hairdresser. I want to barber. I want to cut my hair." And I asked, "Why?" And he said, "Oh, because my best friend told me." Right? So the message was the same. The person was a different one, and so he could hear better from his best friend than from mom, and that's what it is. And it doesn't matter that much what you're going to be saying. It matters how this person want to hear that message. That's what I would say.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. There's a lot of people in the chat commenting, to know your audience, and Natalia, as obviously you make a very good point, because that's why we brought you here to talk today. But it is important to figure out like what holds weight with that person. Do you have to you have to tie it into the bottom line, right? Like, if we have more psychological safety, then we can have these difficult conversations, and then our rate of drop off will be less. We'll have more retention of our employees, which is it costs so much money to onboard new employees. So like, here's a savings or something. Does that person value efficiency? Does they, figure out what buy-in, if you need buy-in from that person, what do they value? And then how can you relate what you want, which is like, more psychological safety, being able to talk about these things and how that will, positively impact something that they care about. All right. We have a couple more questions. I'm going to try and get to as many as we can, but we've got a little under 10 minutes left. So ask your questions, throw them in the chat if you've got them. We want to make sure we don't run out of time here. All right, this person had written in saying, could you elaborate on an empathy-based approach for difficult conversations? Does this strategy change when we're speaking with clients as opposed to teammates? So let's start with the empathy-based approach. What does an empathy-based approach look like in practice?
Love the question. It's very similar to what we said about positions and interests. So the thing is, how does it look like to be person in front of me. And it doesn't matter whether it's a client or it's a coworker or you're working in a team. How does it look like to be this person? The kind of feelings, what matters to this person, the narrative, their interest, not what they want. So the first thing is that you need to be curious enough in order to want to know what else. That will be the first thing, not what the person is saying. I want to see you, right? I'm mad at you, but I want to see you. So always start with an act of generosity and curiosity to be able to go a little bit deeper into the conflict itself, because normally when we have a conflict, it's about things that we want and seems to be in opposition. So we get into an adversarial conversation. So for getting out of there, we need to go deeper. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're still, hitting in the same place. And once we go deeper, finding something that we both care about. Is it, I don't know, that we want this project to be successful? Is it that we just want to make impact and we want to, I don't know, to create a school that is running for all these children? Is it that we want, whatever it is? So what is the common place in which we both care? Mm-hmm. And anchor that place. And I will say, be aware of your own amygdala and the other person's amygdala. How can we make sure that its space is so safe that we can say whatever needs to be said? Mm-hmm. So making sure that the other person can take it and you can take it. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. Doesn't mean that it's going to hurt. But can we say what we need to say in the safest way possible?
Yeah. All right. So
there are no formulas for that. It's just something that you, you try it in the morning, every day, every single time that you go into a conversation, you bring that awareness and that commitment. And sometimes it works better than others. But unfortunately, it's not like the steps that you can.
Makes sense. All right. Okay. So if you are in that situation, when we're trying to have this empathy-based approach, do you think the strategy for it should change if you are speaking with clients as opposed to teammates? So we're talking like internal communication with teammates versus external. I didn't really see this as much of like a power shift. So if that was what you're trying to go for with whoever wrote the question in, let us know. But yeah, so if you are trying to have this conversation externally rather than internally, should that strategy change?
I don't think so, because we are all people. Doesn't matter. You just need to see the person in front of you. So that's why I would say it's not a formula, it's a step. So when you talk to clients, do this. And when you talk to your friend, do that. And when you talk to your coworker and team, no, it doesn't matter. It's just a human being in front of you. So how can you connect with that person instead of going and wanting to win, convince, and sell? Try to make him or her think that they did something wrong and then be fine on the top of that. So no, step away from your own agenda. Try to connect. Give us a little bit of a space to that, and then see how things unfold in.
Very good. Okay.
Releasing control.
Yes. Oh, yes. Releasing that control. All right. If we, leaving from today's conversation, we know people don't want to be in a battlefield, right? Could you give us some of the top mistakes that people make that land them in the middle of that battlefield? Are there certain things you just should not say because they're going to, kick things off?
I told you so. It's one of them. Told you so. Not to
Wait, you mean people don't like to hear "I told you so"?
I told you so. And too emotional is another one. Anything better than phrases, any sort of mindset that you bring in which you feel that you're right, that you want to convince the other person out of a courtroom, and take it that from a former lawyer, people don't react well to when you are trying to convince them. It doesn't work, basically. Mm-hmm. I don't know. If you ever managed to convince somebody who didn't want to do something with good and rational arguments, you're my hero. I never. So
wouldn't that be so satisfying, right?
It is like this, but we keep on trying.
Yeah.
And that the more we try, the more we create conflict. So it's the generous act of stepping out of that way and saying, I don't like it, I don't agree, but still we can have this conversation. And I'm ready to hear why this is important for you. And being fine with, sometimes you can get into an agreement, it's okay too. But you don't need to convince anybody.
Yeah.
You can still have a dialogue and a conversation, listening to the other person and say, well, I hear you. Now, that's not the way I think, or I don't think so. That's okay.
Yeah. All right. So let's say things have proceeded and they're starting to get, the conversation's starting to get kind of out of control.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know, if we should get someone else involved, like get your supervisor, your manager, or HR? Is there a good rule of thumb, is a horrible phrase, but is there a good guideline to know, like, yes, it's okay to get, bring in leadership or something at some point, or are there like rules to this?
I would say that you need to feel it's a personal decision. If you have done what I've been mentioning and you still don't feel safe, then you need to ask for some help. I mean, not because you can handle, but somebody, what I'm trying to say is that when there is a conflict, there is also, and I can't get very much into this, but the power dynamics is another element of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Gender, race, they can play a lot of roles into these conversations. So when certain things, the power dynamic start to be very, very powerful and more important than any other thing, and stepping out is not helping, then it might be the right moment to ask for somebody else to mediate or to see what is happening and to bring another dynamic into the conversation. So if the difference, for example, in terms of power are very, very high, because we are in a very hierarchical and situation, I have a lot to lose in front of the other person, maybe that's the moment in which, and I don't find the strategy and I don't find a way of getting this aligned and put ourselves in a situation in which power is not so important in order to have that conversation, then I might need to talk to somebody else. Or if you feel that that's the right thing to do, and just trust your own gut feelings.
Okay. Oof, loving this. All right. We only have about 3 minutes left. And I think we've gotten through the questions that were in the chat. So if y'all have another one to ask, hurry scurry. But the last one I want to touch on is, do you think that it's appropriate to approach HR when you need to have a sensitive conversation with someone else on the team? Should you be proactive about this and get in touch with HR first? Or do you think it's something that, we should handle ourselves and then escalate if needed?
And again, it's so personal, isn't it? And depends on the circumstances. I just cannot answer, what to do in a situation. I will say that if you feel that you can handle it properly, definitely ask for help and ask to somebody in your company HR to see what can be done. There is nothing wrong. If you feel that that's not possible to have this conversation, and it's okay to talk to somebody else. Doesn't need to be, there's nothing wrong, and there is no the perfect moment or in this moment exactly. No, if you feel that that's the right thing to do, do it. And if it ends up being not a good idea, learn for it.
Yes.
That's the only thing that we can do. So most of the time is that we're going to need to learn a lot having difficult conversation. It's not going to go our way many, many times. But if you're up there for learning, for connecting, for learning more about others and yourself, it's going to be fine. Yes, sometimes it's going to go wrong, but at the end, it's going to be fine because you're going to learn out of that.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And I very much appreciate, kind of bringing it back to that fact of, if you go into these conversations looking to learn something, then the time's not wasted. You might just learn something about yourself. You might learn something about the other person. You might even just learn how not to do this in the future. And that's okay. That is fine. You don't have to be right to, get something from the conversation.
Last thing that I want to say is something that I do when I need to have a decision regarding a conversation. I write down why I'm going to do this, why I'm going to go to HR, because and all the narratives, the interests that force you or think that you have to make that decision. And then 3 months later, get back to it. And so in this way, we can learn why sometimes we are making decisions to have certain conversations in a certain way. What is driven us? What kind of narratives? What kind of interests? What kind of fear? So having a sort of a diary of your difficult conversations, how I feel before, how I felt after, and what happened. We can do a lot of learning if we do that.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Natalia, I just want to say huge thank you. This has been wonderful to get to learn from you for the last hour. Huge thanks to our audience members as well. Y'all wrote in with some amazing questions, both prior to today's event as well as during. So thank you all for keeping that chat hopping. It's one of my favorite things to see y'all connect and learn and grow from each other. So thank you for all of that. Natalia, thank you so much. I hope we get to do this again soon.
Yes, thank you to all. Well, I mean, I don't know what time it is in some of the places where you are, but thank you for coming. It has been great. You can contact me in LinkedIn if you want to, if you have more questions, or send me an email to natalia@thestorythatmatters.com. I will happy to connect with you and keep on talking.
Oh, thank you so much, Natalia. All right, for all of you out there, I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation. If you are one of our frequent flyers, thank you so much for joining. I love seeing the familiar faces. If this was your first Power to Fly event, I hope you loved it, and I cannot wait to see you on new events in the future. We've got great programming coming to you tomorrow and the rest of this week. We're going to talk about kickstarting your digital nomad life, how to redefine professional growth, how to get job fulfillment, as well as top tips to improve your public speaking skills. So if any of those subjects resonate with you, I hope that you'll head over to our website. I put links in the chat and sign up for some of those future chats. As for today, I hope everybody has a safe, happy, and healthy rest of your day, and we can't wait to see you back here sometime soon. Bye.